She begged for mercy from the living, but salvation came from the dead. The cobblestones were slick with rain and rot. London, 1847. The kind of night where even the gaslights seemed to shiver against their iron posts, casting trembling shadows across Whitechapel's narrow alleys. Hunger gnawed at Eleanor's ribs like a living thing, teeth sharper than any blade she'd ever known. She was 23, though her reflection in shop windows looked older, hollow cheeks, dark circles carved beneath gray eyes that once held hope. 3 months since the fever took her mother. 2 months since the factory dismissed her for fainting at the loom. 5 weeks since she'd eaten anything more substantial than discarded apple cores and rainwater collected in her cupped palms. The bakery on Dorset Street stayed lit past midnight. Through the fogged window, she could see the baker's wife arranging tomorrow's loaves on wooden shelves, golden crusts still steaming. Eleanor's stomach cramped so violently she doubled over against the brick wall, fingers clawing at mortar that crumbled like her resolve. Just one piece, just enough to silence the screaming in her belly. She waited until the woman disappeared into the back room. The door wasn't locked. Why would it be? No one in Whitechapel was desperate enough to steal from Tobias Greer, the butcher's cousin, the man whose fists had broken bones for lesser offenses than theft. Eleanor's hand trembled as she reached for the smallest loaf, still warm, smelling of yeast and salvation. She tucked it against her chest beneath her threadbare shawl and turned toward the door. "Thief!" The baker's wife stood in the doorway, face purple with rage, pointing at Eleanor like she'd murdered someone. "Thief! Someone call the constable! She's stolen from us!" Eleanor ran. Her worn boots slapped against wet stone as she tore through the alley. The bread clutched so tightly against her ribs she could feel her heartbeat pulsing through the crust. Behind her, voices multiplied. The baker, his sons, neighbors drawn by the commotion like crows to carrion. "Hang her!" someone shouted. "Transportation's too good for the likes of her!" She turned a corner into Mitre Square, lungs burning, vision blurring with tears and rain. The alley dead-ended against a brick wall 12 feet high. No escape, no mercy. The mob rounded the corner, at least 8 of them now, led by Tobias Greer himself, a mountain of a man with hands like ham hocks and eyes that promised violence. "Please," Eleanor gasped, backing against the wall, still holding the bread. "Please, I was starving." "Should have thought of that before you stole." Greer snarled, cracking his knuckles. "We'll make an example of you, girl. Can't have every beggar in London thinking they can take what ain't theirs." Eleanor closed her eyes, waiting for the first blow. It never came. A sound like silk tearing, a wet thud, screaming. When she opened her eyes, a man stood between her and the mob, though "man" felt like the wrong word. He was tall, impossibly tall, dressed in black that seemed to drink the lamplight. His hair was dark as midnight, pulled back from a face that could have been carved from marble, all sharp angles and aristocratic beauty that didn't belong in Whitechapel's filth. Tobias Greer was on his knees, clutching his throat where 5 precise puncture wounds wept crimson. "Leave," the stranger said. His voice was quiet. Cultured, British accent, polished to perfection. But underneath ran something ancient and absolutely lethal. "Or I'll show you what theft truly costs." The mob scattered like rats, dragging Greer between them, his blood leaving a trail that the rain slowly washed away. Eleanor stood frozen, pressed against the wall, still clutching her stolen bread. The stranger turned to face her, and she saw his eyes, gray like storm clouds, old beyond measure, haunted by centuries she couldn't begin to comprehend. "You're bleeding," he observed, gesturing to her hands. She looked down and realized she'd cut her palms on the rough brick, red mixing with rainwater. Her voice failed. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." He took a step closer, and she could smell him now. Old books, expensive cologne, and underneath, something metallic and sweet that made her hindbrain scream predator. "You're dying." It wasn't a question. "I know," Eleanor whispered. "I'm starving." "No." His gaze traveled over her with clinical precision. "Consumption. Your lungs are failing. You have perhaps 3 months if you're fortunate. The hunger merely hastens what's already inevitable." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She'd suspected, had felt the weakness spreading through her chest like frost, but hearing it confirmed by this beautiful, terrible stranger made it real. "Then let me die with a full stomach," she said, raising the bread. He caught her wrist before she could take a bite, his fingers cold and impossibly strong. "I can offer you something better than bread." "What?" His smile was sad, ancient, knowing. "A choice you should never have to make." And Eleanor realized, with a shock that traveled from her scalp to her heels, that this man, this creature, was offering her something far more dangerous than death. He was offering her forever. His name was Cassian Ashford, and he'd been dead for 347 years. They sat in his apartments in Belgravia, a world away from Whitechapel's rot, all velvet curtains and Persian rugs and bookshelves that climbed to ceilings, painted with Renaissance frescoes. Eleanor perched on the edge of a chair that cost more than she'd earned in her entire life, the stolen bread finally eaten, her stomach cramping from the sudden richness. "Why?" she asked. Watching him pour tea, he'd never drink from a silver service that reflected candlelight like captured stars. "Why save me?" Cassian settled into the chair across from her, moving with a grace that defied physics. He'd changed into a burgundy smoking jacket, his dark hair still damp from the rain, and Eleanor tried very hard not to notice how beautiful he was. Tried and failed. "Because I was tired," he said simply. "Tired of watching humans tear each other apart over bread and coin and imagined slights. Tired of being a monster who does nothing but feed and hide and wait for the sun to end me." "You're not a monster." His laugh was hollow. "You met me an hour ago, Eleanor. You know nothing about me. I know you could have killed them all. You only wounded Greer. Just enough to make them run. I've killed thousands." His eyes met hers, unflinching. Not from necessity, from rage, from hunger, from the simple, ugly truth that power without consequence breeds cruelty. "I am exactly what your priests warn against." Eleanor leaned forward, gray eyes searching his face. "Then why restrain yourself now?" "Because somewhere in the last century, I grew weary of being what I am." He rose, moving to the window overlooking rain-soaked London. "I've spent 50 years trying to atone, saving those I can, feeding only from the wicked, trying to convince myself that immortality might serve some purpose beyond accumulating wealth and watching civilizations crumble. And has it worked? No." The word was barely a whisper. "Until tonight, when I saw you, dying, starving, stealing bread to survive one more day. And I realized I'd been asking the wrong question." "What question?" He turned, and the lamplight caught the silver in his eyes. "Not, can I be redeemed? But, can I redeem someone else?" Eleanor's breath caught. "You want to turn me. I want to offer you a choice." Cassian crossed to her, kneeling so they were eye level, his hands carefully clasped to keep from touching her. "You're dying, Eleanor. Consumption doesn't care that you're young, that you've done nothing to deserve such suffering. In 3 months, you'll drown in your own blood, alone in some workhouse bed, forgotten before you're cold." Tears burned her eyes. "I know." "Or," his voice dropped, intimate and terrible, "I can give you eternity, strength, healing. You'll never hunger again, never fear the cold or the sickness or the cruelty of men who see you as less than human." "At what cost? Your humanity, your sunlight, your mortal soul, if such things exist." He didn't look away. "You'll outlive everyone you love. You'll have to feed on human blood to survive. You'll become the thing children fear in darkness." Eleanor studied his face. the sorrow carved into features that would never age, the loneliness that radiated from him like winter cold. "You're trying to talk me out of it." "I'm trying to be honest," Cassian's voice cracked. "I've turned 6 people across 3 centuries. Only one remains. The others chose the sun within decades, unable to bear what they'd become. I won't add another regret to my collection unless you understand the weight of forever." She reached out slowly and touched his cheek. His skin was cold, smooth as marble, and he flinched as though she'd burned him. "I've been dying since the day I was born," Eleanor said softly. "Dying of poverty, dying of hunger, dying of being invisible to everyone who could help. At least this death offers me a choice." "Eleanor, I choose you," she whispered. "I choose forever, even if it damns me." Cassian closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they darkened to the color of old blood. "Then we begin tonight. But first, you need to understand what you're agreeing to. The transformation takes 3 days. 3 days of fever and hallucinations and pain that will make you beg for death. I'll be with you every moment, but I cannot make it easier." "I've survived worse." "No." His hand covered hers where it still rested against his face. "You haven't." Cassian had prepared the chamber weeks ago, though he hadn't known why. A room deep in the mansion's heart, windowless, lined with silk and silver and symbols older than Christianity. Candles burned in iron sconces, casting shadows that seemed to breathe. Eleanor lay on the 4-poster bed, still wearing her wet, threadbare dress, watching Cassian move through the space with the precision of ritual practiced across centuries. "The transformation has 3 stages," he explained, voice steady though his hands trembled slightly as he arranged vials of dark liquid on the bedside table. "First, my venom enters your bloodstream. It will feel like fire in your veins, burning away your mortality cell by cell. This lasts approximately 12 hours. Eleanor nodded, trying to keep her breathing even. "Second, your body dies, your heart will stop, your lungs will cease. For 36 hours, you'll exist in a state between life and death, conscious but unable to move or speak. You'll experience every memory you've ever had, every pain, every loss, every moment of joy. He paused. "It's the soul's inventory before transformation." "And the 3rd stage? Rebirth." Cassian sat on the bed's edge, maintaining careful distance. "Your heart restarts. Your body reconstructs itself, perfect and immortal. But you'll wake ravenous, Eleanor, hungry beyond anything you've experienced. I'll be here to guide you through the first feeding, but you must promise me something." "What?" "That you'll fight the bloodlust, that you'll remember you're choosing to become a monster who refuses to be monstrous." His eyes held hers. "Promise me you won't let eternity make you cruel." "I promise." "Then we begin." He rolled up his sleeve, exposing his wrist. 3 bites. The first introduces the venom. The second stops your heart. The third binds us. You'll be able to feel my presence, sense my emotions, hear my thoughts if you concentrate. We'll be connected until one of us chooses the sun. Eleanor's pulse hammered in her throat. "Connected how?" "Maker and progeny, sire and child, master and—" He stopped himself. "It's complicated. You'll understand when you wake." He raised his wrist to his mouth, and Eleanor watched, fascinated and horrified as his canines extended, longer, sharper, designed to pierce and drain. He bit into his own flesh, and blood welled up dark as wine, smelling of copper and something indefinably ancient. "Drink," Cassian said, offering his wrist to her lips. Eleanor hesitated only a moment before pressing her mouth to his skin. The blood was cold, thick, tasting of metal and earth and midnight. It burned going down, searing a path from her throat to her stomach to her racing heart. The world tilted. Pain exploded through her veins, white-hot and absolute. She screamed, back arching off the bed, and Cassian caught her, cradling her against his chest as the venom spread like wildfire through her dying body. "I'm here," he whispered against her hair, his voice the only anchor in an ocean of agony. "I'm here, Eleanor. You're not alone." The fever consumed her. She felt her bones rearranging, her lungs expelling their final breath, her heart struggling against the venom that rewrote every cell. Through the pain, she felt Cassian's hand stroking her hair, his voice murmuring words in languages dead before England existed. Hours passed, days. Time became meaningless. When lucidity returned, she felt his wrist against her lips again. "Second bite," he said, and she drank. Her heart stopped. Darkness swallowed her whole, and Eleanor fell into memory, her mother's hands braiding her hair, the factory's deafening looms, the hollow ache of starvation, the rain against her face as she ran through Whitechapel's alleys. Every moment of her 23 years played out in excruciating detail, beautiful and terrible, and finally ending. She felt Cassian with her even in death, his presence a silver thread connecting her to existence. And then, after an eternity compressed into 36 hours, the third bite. This time, his blood tasted different, sweeter, richer, alive with power that sang through her reconstructing veins. Her heart kicked once, twice, found its rhythm. Her lungs expanded. Her eyes opened to a world rendered in impossible detail, every candle flame a universe, every shadow a story, Cassian's face above hers more beautiful than any mortal perception could capture. "Welcome back," he whispered, and smiled. Eleanor smiled back, felt her new fangs against her lip, and realized she was starving. "And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these immortal confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The hunger was a living thing, clawing at Eleanor's throat like a beast desperate to escape. Every heartbeat in the mansion, the servants moving through distant corridors, the rats in the walls, the city's millions pulsing beyond the windows, sang to her in crimson melody. "Focus on my voice." Cassian stood before her, hands raised in a calming gesture, though she could see the tension in his shoulders. "The hunger will never fully leave, but you can master it. You must master it, Eleanor, or you'll become what I've spent centuries trying not to be. I need—" Her voice came out wrong, layered with harmonics that seemed to vibrate the very air. "I need blood. Now. Please. I know, but not from the innocent." He moved to the table, lifting a crystal decanter filled with dark liquid. "This is blood I've acquired from London Hospital, donated willingly by the living, payment rendered. It will sustain you through the first weeks until you learn control." Eleanor's hands shook as she took the decanter, her new senses cataloging every molecule, the metallic tang, the fading warmth, the ghost of whoever had given this life. She drank directly from the crystal, and though it lacked the intensity of fresh blood pumping from a living vein, it quieted the beast enough to think. "Better?" Cassian asked. She nodded, lowering the decanter, aware of the blood staining her lips. "How long before I can go outside?" "Weeks, perhaps months. You need to learn to walk past humans without hunting them, to hear heartbeats without going feral, to control the strength that could accidentally crush bone." He gestured to the chair she'd been sitting in earlier. Its arm now bore finger-shaped dents in solid oak. "You did that without trying." Eleanor stared at the damage, horrified. "I could hurt someone. You could kill someone with a careless touch. That's why we train." Cassian moved to the center of the room, rolling up his sleeves. "Try to grab me." "What? You're fast now, stronger than any human. But I'm older, which means I'm faster still. Try to catch me, Eleanor. Learn the limits of your new body." She lunged, and the world blurred. One moment she stood by the table, The next, she'd crossed 20 feet in a heartbeat. But Cassian wasn't there anymore. He stood behind her, fingers light on her shoulder. "Again," he said. They danced through the room, Eleanor attacking with growing frustration, Cassian evading with the ease of 3 centuries' practice. He taught her to read micro-expressions, to anticipate movement from the tension in muscle, to flow like water instead of striking like a hammer. "You're thinking like a human," he said after she'd crashed into the bookshelf for the 3rd time, sending leather-bound volumes tumbling. "Your body moves faster than conscious thought now. Stop planning. Feel." Eleanor closed her eyes, breathing unnecessarily, but finding comfort in the familiar rhythm. She reached out with senses she didn't know existed, feeling the air currents Cassian's movements created, hearing the whisper of fabric against his skin, smelling the ancient blood that animated him. She moved without thinking. Her hand closed around his wrist, and when she opened her eyes, she'd caught him. Cassian smiled, genuine pride warming his features. That's the beginning. They trained through the night and into the false day of the windowless chamber. He taught her to retract her fangs at will, to moderate her strength, to speak without the predatory harmonics that would terrify humans. Between lessons they talked, Eleanor sharing memories of her short human life, Cassian revealing fragments of his long undead one. "I was turned during the English Civil War," he said, sitting on the floor beside her as candles burned low. 1678. I was a physician, tending royalist wounded at a manor house outside Oxford. A woman came to me, beautiful beyond measure, begging for help. She'd been shot, she said, needed my surgical skills. She turned you. She drained me, then forced me to drink from her wrist while my colleagues slept upstairs. His voice went distant. I woke 3 days later to find I'd killed them all in my frenzy. Every man I'd served with, good men with families, slaughtered because I couldn't control the hunger. Eleanor reached for his hand, threading her cold fingers through his. It wasn't your fault. Wasn't it? I chose to drink. Chose transformation over death. He looked at their joined hands, something vulnerable crossing his face. My maker abandoned me that night, said I was weak for mourning humans, that compassion had no place in our kind. I spent the next century proving her wrong, by saving people like me, by trying to become someone worthy of the immortality I never wanted. Cassian turned to face her fully. Eleanor, you need to understand something. The connection between us, maker and progeny, it's deeper than you realize. I can feel your hunger, your fear, your joy, and you'll feel mine if you open yourself to it. Eleanor concentrated, reaching for that silver thread she'd sensed during her transformation, and suddenly she felt it. Cassian's emotions, complex and layered. Guilt and hope and loneliness and something else, something tender and terrified that made her breath catch. You care about me? She whispered. More than I should, considering we've known each other less than a week. His thumb traced circles on her palm. I've trained 6 progeny, loved 3 of them like children, but with you, it's different. How? I don't know yet, and that terrifies me more than 300 years of damnation. They sat in silence, hands clasped, 2 immortals finding comfort in shared cold, while somewhere far above, the sun rose on a London neither could see. 6 weeks passed in the windowless chamber. 6 weeks of training, feeding from hospital blood, and slowly mastering the monster Cassian had made her. Eleanor could now walk past the servants without betraying bloodlust, could control her strength enough to handle crystal without shattering it, could speak without the predatory resonance that marked her as other. But she hadn't left the mansion, hadn't seen stars or felt rain or experienced the freedom Cassian promised came with immortality. Tonight, he announced on the 43rd night of her new existence, entering the chamber in a long black coat that belonged to another century. You're ready. Eleanor looked up from the book she'd been reading. Cassian's collection included first editions and texts in dead languages, and her enhanced mind devoured them hungrily. "Where are we going?" "Hunting." His expression was grave. "Not for pleasure, Eleanor, for justice. There's a man in Shoreditch, Edmund Cross, who's been trafficking children from the workhouses, selling them to factories, brothels, anyone who'll pay. The authorities know, but won't act. He has connections, wealth, protection. And we're going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. You're going to watch to understand what we are and what we do." Cassian offered his hand. "I won't lie and call us heroes. We're predators who've chosen to prey on worse predators. Some nights that feels like redemption. Most nights it just feels like delay." Eleanor took his hand, rising. "Teach me." They left through the servants' entrance, and the moment Eleanor stepped into the London night, she nearly wept. The air tasted of coal smoke and river water, and 1,000 human scents layered like a symphony. Above, stars burned with an intensity no human eye could capture. Around them, the city breathed and pulsed and lived with terrible beauty. "Overwhelming?" Cassian asked, steadying her. "Magnificent." They moved through shadows, faster than human perception, two ghosts hunting through Whitechapel and Shoreditch. Cassian taught her to track by scent, to read the stories written in blood and breath, to distinguish the innocent from the guilty by the subtle markers only predators could sense. Edmund Cross's house stood on Commercial Road, respectable and well-maintained, betraying nothing of the horrors within. But Eleanor could smell it now. Fear, young fear, children's tears and terror soaked into the wallpaper. "He's alone," Cassian said, head tilted as he listened to heartbeats within. "The children are locked in the cellar, 4 of them, ages 7 to 12. He's planning to move them tomorrow to a factory in Manchester where they'll work until they die." Rage burned through Eleanor's veins, hotter than the transformation fever. "How do you know?" "I've been tracking him for 3 months, gathering evidence, confirming the worst." He looked at her, eyes ancient and sad. "This is what we do, Eleanor. We become the justice the world refuses to deliver." They entered through the second-story window, silent as smoke. Cross sat at his desk, counting coins, utterly unaware that death had come calling. He was 60. Well-fed, wearing expensive clothes purchased with children's suffering. Cassian appeared before him faster than thought, one hand around Cross's throat, lifting him from his chair. The man's eyes bulged, mouth working soundlessly. "Edmund Cross," Cassian said, voice quiet and absolutely lethal. "You've sold 43 children in the last year, 43 souls traded for profit. Do you have anything to say?" Cross managed a wheeze. "Who?" "Someone who remembers what it's like to be powerless, to beg for mercy and receive only cruelty." Cassian's fangs extended. "I won't give you mercy either, but I will give you honesty. This will hurt, and you'll die knowing exactly why." He bit into Cross's throat, not to feed but to punish, tearing through flesh with deliberate savagery. The man's screams cut off quickly as blood flooded his lungs. Eleanor watched, feeling no pity, only grim satisfaction that this monster would never hurt another child. When Cross's heart stopped, Cassian let the body fall, wiping blood from his mouth with clinical precision. "Go free the children," he said to Eleanor. "I'll stage this as a heart attack. The authorities will find his ledgers, his correspondence. The network will collapse without him." Eleanor found them in the cellar, 3 girls and a boy, huddled together, filthy and terrified. She approached slowly, retracting her fangs, softening her expression. "It's all right," she said gently. "The bad man is gone. He can't hurt you anymore." The smallest girl looked up with huge eyes. "Are you an angel?" Eleanor's throat tightened. "Something like that. Come on, let's get you somewhere safe." They led the children to a church in Bethnal Green, leaving them on the steps with notes pinned to their ragged clothes, explaining where they'd come from. The priest would ensure they found better homes, or at least homes where they wouldn't be sold like livestock. As they walked back through the pre-dawn darkness, Eleanor felt Cassian's hand find hers. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like I finally understand why you chose this." She squeezed his fingers. "We're not heroes, but we're not monsters either. We're something in between, something that uses damnation to protect the damned." That's the most eloquent definition of our existence I've heard in 3 centuries. They reached the mansion as false dawn painted the eastern sky. Inside, in their windowless sanctuary, Eleanor turned to Cassian and truly saw him for the first time, not as her maker, not as an ancient predator, but as a man who'd spent lifetimes trying to transform curse into blessing. "Thank you," she whispered, "for choosing me, for teaching me that eternity doesn't have to mean losing yourself." Cassian cupped her face in his cold hands. "Thank you for reminding me why I keep fighting. I'd forgotten, before you, that immortality might be bearable with someone who understands." They stood like that, foreheads touching, 2 undead souls finding something dangerously close to hope in each other's presence. Comment eternal if you'd trade your mortality to protect those who can't protect themselves. 3 months into Eleanor's immortality, something shifted between them. It started small, Cassian bringing her first editions of novels she'd never been able to afford as a human. Eleanor leaving drawings she'd sketched of him reading by candlelight. Conversations that stretched through entire nights, discussing philosophy and history and the terrible beauty of their existence. Touches that lingered longer than necessary, hands finding reasons to connect. The bond between maker and progeny had deepened into something neither could name and both feared to acknowledge. "Tell me about your first love," Eleanor said one night as they sat in the library, rain drumming against windows they'd never opened during daylight. Cassian looked up from his book, surprised. "Why?" "Because you've lived 300 years and you never speak of loving anyone." "Not romantically." He was quiet for a long moment, gaze distant. "Her name was Catherine, 1702. She was a widow, sharp-tongued and fearless, and she made me remember what it felt like to be human. I courted her for 2 years, always at night, always hiding what I was." "What happened?" "I was going to turn her, had everything prepared, had asked her permission. But the night before the transformation, she was killed, thrown from a horse, her neck broken instantly." His voice went hollow. "I'd waited too long, convinced myself we had time, and I learned the cruelest lesson. Immortals should never love mortals. The loss is inevitable and unbearable." Eleanor moved from her chair to sit beside him on the sofa, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Is that why you've avoided it since?" "I've turned 6 people, loved 3 like family, but romantic love?" He shook his head. "Too dangerous, too consuming. I couldn't bear to watch someone I loved that deeply struggle with immortality, couldn't survive them choosing the sun because they couldn't bear forever. What if they didn't choose the sun? What if they chose you?" Cassian finally looked at her, and Eleanor saw 3 centuries of loneliness in those storm-gray eyes. "That might be even more terrifying." "Why?" "Because then I'd have everything I never let myself want." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "Eleanor, I need you to understand something. What we have, this connection, it's more than the maker bond. I feel it every time you laugh, every time you're excited about mastering some new skill, every time you look at me like I'm not a monster who damned you to darkness." Her breath caught. "Cassian." "I'm falling in love with you," he said quietly, each word precise and terrified. "Have been since the night I found you stealing bread, and it grows stronger every moment we spend together. But I don't know if what you feel is genuine or just the bond compelling you to care for your maker. I can't take advantage of that." Eleanor turned to face him fully, her free hand coming up to touch his cheek. The bond lets me feel your emotions. It doesn't create mine. What I feel when I look at you, the safety, the understanding, the absolute certainty that I'd choose this damnation again if it meant spending eternity at your side. That's not compulsion, Cassian. That's choice. You don't know that. I do. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Because when I reach for the bond, I feel what you feel for me. And it mirrors everything I feel for you. This isn't maker and progeny anymore. This is two people who found each other in darkness and decided that darkness was bearable as long as they didn't face it alone. Cassian's control cracked. He pulled her against him, one hand tangling in her hair, the other wrapped around her waist, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. Eleanor felt his centuries of loneliness pouring through the bond, the weight of immortality he'd carried alone, the exhaustion of being good when nature demanded cruelty, the desperate hope that maybe, finally, he'd found someone who understood. "I love you," she whispered against his throat. "I love you so much it terrifies me." "I love you." His voice broke. "I love you, and I don't know how to do this without destroying us both." Then we learn together. Eleanor pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "We have eternity, remember? We can afford to make mistakes." Cassian laughed, the sound wet with unshed tears. Vampires couldn't cry. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple. It's terrifying and complicated and probably doomed, but it's also simple." She kissed his forehead, his cheeks, the corner of his mouth. "I choose you, every night, forever, until the sun takes us both." He captured her lips then, kissing her with 3 centuries of restraint finally breaking. It was tender and desperate and absolutely consuming, 2 undead souls discovering that even monsters could love with devastating completeness. When they finally pulled apart, Cassian rested his forehead against hers. "I don't deserve you. You deserve everything." Eleanor's fingers traced the line of his jaw. "You deserve someone who sees that spending 300 years trying to be good is worth more than centuries of being cruel. You deserve to be loved without reservation, and I intend to spend eternity proving it." They sat like that until dawn threatened, wrapped in each other and the impossible gift of finding love in damnation, 2 immortals discovering that forever felt less like a curse when you didn't face it alone. If this story has already captured you, leave a like. It helps the voices of those who chose eternity reach more hearts. The peace shattered on a December night when snow fell soft over London. Eleanor and Cassian had been hunting Edmund Cross's remaining associates, dismantling the child trafficking network piece by piece. They'd grown comfortable, perhaps too comfortable, moving through the city like avenging angels, confident in their power and their purpose. They didn't notice the watchers until it was too late. "Cassian," Eleanor whispered, freezing in an alley off Brick Lane. Her enhanced senses screamed danger: silver, holy water, the particular scent of humans who hunted supernatural things. "We're being followed." He'd already noticed, body coiled tight, eyes scanning shadows. 12 of them. Well armed. They've been tracking us for at least 2 weeks. "What do we do?" "Run!" They bolted, but the hunters had chosen their ground carefully. The alley dead-ended in a courtyard surrounded by buildings, every exit blocked by men carrying crossbows loaded with silver-tipped bolts, bottles of blessed water, and stakes carved from rowan wood. A man stepped forward, tall, weathered, wearing a priest's collar and a hunter's cold confidence. "Cassian Ashford, the Belgravia vampire. We've been searching for you a very long time." Cassian moved in front of Eleanor, shielding her with his body. "Father Whitmore, still hiding murder behind scripture, I see. It's not murder to destroy demons." Whitmore's smile was cruel. "Though I admit, I'm surprised to find you with a companion. I'd heard you worked alone." "Things change." "Indeed. Tell me, does your fledgling know what you are? What you've done?" Whitmore addressed Eleanor directly. Has he told you about the 37 men, women, and children he slaughtered in Edinburgh, 1723? Or the village he burned in Cornwall, 1799? Your beloved maker isn't the reformed saint he pretends to be. Eleanor felt the truth slam into her through the bond. Shame, old horror, confirmation of the accusations. Cassian flinched but didn't deny it. That was a different century, he said quietly. A different man. No, the same monster with better lies. Whitmore raised his hand, and hunters tightened their circle. We're taking you both. The church has questions about the recent deaths, 9 men in 3 months, all with their throats torn out. Vigilante vampires are still vampires. They were trafficking children, Eleanor snapped. We stopped monsters your church wouldn't touch. So you admit to murder? I admit to justice. Whitmore laughed. There's no justice in damnation, child. Only delayed judgment. He gestured, and 4 hunters moved forward with silver chains. Surrender, and we'll make your executions quick. Fight, and we'll make them last days. Cassian's hand found Eleanor's, squeezing once. Through the bond, she felt his plan forming. He'd attack first, draw their attention, create an opening for her to escape. Alone, he might survive. Together, they'd both die. No, she whispered. Eleanor, I'm not leaving you. Her voice rose. You taught me we don't abandon family. That's what you are to me, Cassian. Family, lover, everything. I won't survive without you, and I won't try. How touching, Whitmore sneered. The monsters think they can love. Something snapped in Eleanor's chest. 3 months of control, of learning to be more than beast, shattered in a heartbeat. She launched herself at the nearest hunter, moving faster than she ever had, rage and terror and absolute refusal to lose Cassian burning through her veins like fire. Her hand closed around the hunter's throat, and she threw him 30 feet into a brick wall with a sickening crunch. A crossbow bolt whistled past her ear. Cassian was moving too, a blur of controlled violence, disarming hunters with surgical precision while avoiding kill shots. Holy water splashed across Eleanor's arm, and she screamed, skin blistering, but didn't stop. She fought like the desperate newborn thing she was, all instinct and fury and the bone-deep knowledge that she'd burn this entire city before she let them take Cassian. But there were too many. A bolt caught her shoulder, silver burning through tissue. Another grazed her thigh. Cassian took 3 bolts protecting her, silver sizzling in his ancient flesh, slowing him enough for chains to wrap around his wrists. Eleanor, run! His voice was agonized. Please! She couldn't, wouldn't. Even as hunters closed around her, even as silver chains bit into her wrists, even as Whitmore raised a stake above Cassian's heart, Eleanor reached through the bond and poured everything she felt into it. Love and terror and absolute refusal to let him die alone. I'm here, she thought, whispered. Whatever comes, I'm here. And Cassian, bleeding and chained, smiled. Then the world exploded in light. The light came from above, searing and terrible. Eleanor looked up through pain-blurred vision and saw her, a woman descending from the rooftop, moving with a grace that made even Cassian look clumsy. She was ancient, power radiating from her like heat from a forge, with silver hair and eyes like black diamonds. Enough, the woman said, voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Father Whitmore froze. Every hunter froze. Even Cassian stared in shock. Morgana, he whispered. The woman, Morgana, surveyed the courtyard with cold disdain. Whitmore, still playing executioner for a god who'd weep to see your cruelty. Have you learned nothing in 40 years? This doesn't concern you, vampire. You're threatening my grandson. It concerns me greatly. She moved between Cassian and the hunters, and Eleanor felt the shift in power. This was no ordinary vampire. This was something ancient and terrible and absolutely beyond human capacity to destroy. Grandson? Whitmore's voice cracked, Cassian is my progeny's progeny, which means any harm that comes to him comes to me. And I promise, priest, you don't want that. Morgana's smile showed fangs older than Christianity. Release them both, now, or I demonstrate why your church stopped hunting my line 2 centuries ago. The hunters looked to Whitmore, who'd gone pale. Whatever history existed between him and this ancient creature, it clearly ended badly for humans who opposed her. Release them, he said finally, voice tight with impotent rage. The chains fell away. Cassian staggered to Eleanor, pulling silver bolts from her flesh while she did the same for him. Through the bond, she felt his shock and confusion. He hadn't known Morgana was in London, hadn't seen her in over a century. Morgana waited until the hunters retreated, then turned to face them both. Up close, Eleanor could see the weight of millennia in those dark eyes, the terrible beauty of something that had outlived empires. Walk, Morgana commanded. We have much to discuss. They followed her through snow-dusted streets to a townhouse in Mayfair that reeked of old money and older blood. Inside, the furnishings belonged to a dozen different eras, artifacts collected across centuries. Sit, Morgana said, pouring blood from a crystal decanter. Human. Fresh. Expensive. Drink. Heal. Then explain to me why my favorite descendant is stupid enough to hunt criminals in Victorian London with the church actively searching for vampires. Cassian took the glass, drinking mechanically. I didn't know you were in London. I've been here 6 months, watching you play vigilante with your new progeny. Morgana's gaze shifted to Eleanor, assessing. She's young. 3 months? 4? 3. And already you've bonded deeply enough to nearly die for each other. How predictable. But Morgana's expression softened slightly. What's your name, child? Eleanor. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Eleanor Ashford, apparently, given the whole family connection. Morgana laughed, the sound surprisingly warm. She has spine. I approve. Cassian always did choose his progeny well, even if he chose terribly for himself. Morgana, Cassian started. You're hunting in a city with active vampire hunters, drawing attention to our kind, killing humans regardless of their crimes, and you've fallen in love with a newborn who doesn't yet understand the weight of eternity. Morgana leaned forward. You're repeating every mistake I made when I turned your maker, and watching you stumble toward the same pain breaks something in me I thought long dead. Eleanor felt Cassian's grief surge through the bond. I'm trying to be different, to use what I am for something good. I know, and that's exactly what makes this tragic. Morgana's expression went distant. Your maker, my progeny, William, tried the same thing. Spent 50 years as a vigilante, killing the wicked, protecting the innocent. Do you know what happened? He walked into the sun, Cassian said quietly, because he couldn't bear the weight, couldn't reconcile the monster he'd become with the hero he wanted to be. The guilt destroyed him faster than any hunter. Morgana looked at them both. I won't watch you two walk the same path. I won't lose another line to noble suicide. Then what do you suggest? Eleanor asked. We just feed and hide and pretend the suffering around us doesn't exist? I suggest you be smarter, more careful, less heroic and more strategic. Morgana stood, moving to the window. The hunters know your faces now. London isn't safe, but I have estates across Europe, places where you could continue your vigilante work without the church breathing down your necks. Cassian and Eleanor exchanged glances, communicating through the bond in ways that transcended words. We'd be leaving everything, Cassian said. You'd be surviving, together. Morgana turned back, and Eleanor saw genuine affection in those ancient eyes. I lost William because I wasn't there to guide him, to show him how to balance immortality and morality without being consumed by either. I won't make that mistake with you. Eleanor felt the offer's weight. Exile, yes, but also opportunity. A chance to continue their work away from England's increasingly dangerous vampire hunters. A chance to build something lasting with Cassian, with the protection of a vampire older and stronger than anything they'd face alone. "Where?" she asked. Morgana smiled. "Vienna. I have a manor outside the city, connections with the occult underground, and enough influence to ensure you're left alone. The city has crime enough to satisfy your moral crusade and beauty enough to remind you why existence is worth the damnation." Cassian reached for Eleanor's hand. Through the bond, she felt his question, his need for her input on this decision that would shape their eternity. She squeezed his fingers, then looked at Morgana. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow night, before Whitmore gathers reinforcements." Morgana's expression warmed further. "Welcome to the family, Eleanor. May you survive your immortality longer than most." 1 year later. The manor outside Vienna sat atop a hill overlooking the Danube, all Gothic spires and ivy-covered stone, windows that glowed with warm light even though the sun had set hours ago. Inside, Eleanor and Cassian had built something neither thought possible: a home. Eleanor stood at the window of their shared chamber, watching snow fall over the winter landscape, and marveled at how much had changed in 12 months. They'd hunted Vienna's criminals with Morgana's guidance, learning to be precise instead of passionate, strategic instead of reactive. They'd saved dozens, maybe hundreds, operating in shadows the church couldn't reach. But more than that, they'd learned to exist together, to love without consuming each other, to face eternity not as burden, but as gift, because they didn't face it alone. "You're thinking too loudly," Cassian said from the bed behind her, his voice warm with affection. Eleanor turned, smiling. He lay against the pillows, reading by candlelight, looking exactly like the man she'd fallen in love with that first night in Whitechapel. Beautiful and haunted and trying so hard to be good despite everything nature demanded. "Just grateful," she said, crossing to sit beside him. "For all of this. For you." Cassian set the book aside, pulling her into his arms. "I'm the one who should be grateful. You gave me a reason to keep fighting. Reminded me that immortality doesn't have to mean isolation." "We gave each other that." Eleanor kissed him softly. Two monsters who refused to be monstrous, finding each other in the dark. The poet surfaces. His fingers traced patterns on her arm. "Have you thought more about Morgana's offer?" She had. Morgana wanted to turn her training into something larger, a network of vampire vigilantes across Europe, immortals who chose to protect rather than prey. It was ambitious, dangerous, and exactly the kind of purposeful eternity Eleanor had craved since her transformation. "I think we should do it," Eleanor said. "Not to be heroes, but to give other vampires what you gave me, a choice, a way to be something other than what we're made to be." Cassian smiled, pride and love warming through the bond. "Then we'll do it together. Build something that outlasts us both." "Nothing outlasts us. We're immortal, remember?" "Fair point." He laughed, pulling her closer. "What do you think? Another 1,000 years of this? Hunting criminals, building networks, pretending we're not absolutely damned. Sounds perfect." Eleanor rested her head on his chest, listening to his unnecessary heartbeat, feeling the bond between them pulse with contentment and love, and the strange, terrible gift of forever. "Though I might need a break in Century 5 for good behavior." Noted. They lay like that as snow fell beyond the windows, two immortals wrapped in each other, and the impossible hope that damnation could be transformed into something worth the price. A knock interrupted the peaceful moment. Morgana entered without waiting for permission, carrying a letter sealed with red wax. "News from Prague. There's a vampire there, newly turned, struggling with the bloodlust. She's killed 3 innocents and is planning to walk into the sun." Eleanor and Cassian sat up, instantly alert. "When do we leave?" Eleanor asked. Morgana smiled. Dawn, I've made arrangements. She studied them both, something soft crossing her ancient features. You've built something remarkable here, something I didn't think possible after William's death. I'm proud of you both. After she left, Cassian turned to Eleanor. Are you ready for this? Building a network means we'll see others struggle, watch some choose the sun, fail to save everyone. I know. Eleanor took his hand. But we'll save some. And those we save will save others. We'll build something that grows beyond us, that proves immortality doesn't have to mean becoming monsters. Even though we are monsters. We're monsters who choose mercy. That has to count for something. She kissed him again, longer this time, tasting 3 centuries of loneliness finally ended. Besides, I didn't survive starvation, transformation, and vampire hunters just to give up now. We have forever, Cassian. Let's spend it proving eternity is worth the damnation. He pulled her close. And through the bond, Eleanor felt his absolute agreement, his love, his bone-deep gratitude that out of all the centuries he'd endured, out of all the possible paths immortality could have taken, he'd found her stealing bread in a Whitechapel alley. Forever, he whispered against her hair. I'll spend forever with you, Eleanor. Fighting monsters, saving souls, building something beautiful from the ruins of what we are. That's the most romantic thing you've ever said. I'm 372 years old. I've had time to practice. They laughed together, 2 undead souls finding joy in darkness, choosing each other and mercy and purpose, transforming curse into blessing one night at a time. Outside, the snow fell heavier, covering Vienna in white, and inside the manor on the hill, 2 vampires prepared for their next hunt, their next rescue, their next chance to prove that even the damned could choose redemption. The story would continue, across centuries and cities, through failures and triumphs, through darkness that tested them and love that sustained them. But for tonight, they had each other. And that was enough. That was everything. Subscribe if you believe mercy can resurrect even the damned. Like if you'd choose eternity for love that sees your soul. Comment eternal if you believe even monsters deserve a second chance at redemption.